Hi, Chris.
Hello, Silas.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Sure, thanks for being here.
So,
Welcome
let's shoot you with some questions.
Silas?
Yes.
Go for it.
Slide over this way a little bit.
Okay, where?
I'm sorry about that.
Your
A little
direction?
bit more, a little bit more. That's good.
Oh, you want me in?
That's good.
Not in the shot, just closer to the microphone, right?
Okay.
Okay.
There you go.
Again, Chris, thanks for inviting us.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here.
So, one of the questions I always like to ask is, where do you think is music or the whole movie music world? Where is it going? Where will film music be in the next 5 or 10 years?
Stylistically?
Yeah, will computer take over orchestral stuff, or?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think in terms of feature films, big feature films, it'll probably stay about the same. I think what's happened a lot at this point, at least with the big movies that I think, the big blockbuster action movies and that kind of thing, I think electronics has sort of taken their proper place as, you know, creating emotions, creating, you know, tensions and emotions and ambiences and things like that, and also doing a lot of the big percussive propulsion. But then I think the orchestra still does its job in terms of melody and heart and things like that. I think you're going to see, you know, even more of the sort of a half and half approach, where you've got, you know, kind of like what John Powell would do with, you know, Train Your Dragon or something, where it's got some, which is a great score, by the way, but you know, where it's got some electronics, also orchestra and that kind of thing. I think that's going to be the general gist for what's going on with film music. That said, I think TV music is going to stay mostly electronic, except for, you know, certain shows here and there when they get lucky to continue things. And then I think game music is really, I think there's just going to be more and more and more games, and game music loves to use orchestras, and they love to use live players and this kind of thing. So I think that's a really big, bright, promising future.
Like Medal of Honor, how did you actually get to Medal of Honor? Like taking over Michael Giacchino?
I got to take over from Michael, thankfully, just because he a contract that he had with the Call of Duty people next prohibited him from continuing with both. And
that was after Medal of Honor.
Yeah, yeah, he went to Call of Duty, and then he couldn't work on both games. So the head of music at EA, Steve Schnurr, was looking for someone to replace Michael, and he had worked at Capitol Records about 5 or 6 years before with a very good friend of mine named Julia Michaels, and Julia and I worked for Basil Polidorus together. I was Basil's musical assistant while she was his personal assistant.
Another legend.
Yeah. So we were both working for Basil, and Julia knew that I did big orchestral scores, and so when Steve called her and said, you know, look, I need somebody to take over this game, Medal of Honor, but they really need to be able to do big thematic orchestral music. At that point, she said, you got to meet Chris. A lot of things happened one after another, which was really sort of just amazing that I can't really describe it any other way. But I came out to USC and I wanted to be a guitar player, and so I spent my first year at USC in LA. University of Southern California, studying guitar. And
you studied guitar?
Yeah, I studied guitar, jazz and classical and rock, and I was really hoping to be a performer at that point. But I was also doing a lot of arranging and writing. And one of my composition professors said, you know, look, you sound like, your music sounds very filmic. And I grew up going to the Boston Pops to see John Williams when I was, you know, growing up. I was born in Boston, and I grew up in the Northeast a lot of times. And so what happened is my comp professor said, you know, you should meet a friend of mine. He plays piano. The guy's name was Ralph Grierson, who's one of the greatest studio pianists that has ever lived. And so Ralph said, come to a session with me tomorrow. He didn't tell me who it was or whatever, and he said, come to a session with me tomorrow.
What was your first session?
In my first session, it was at Universal before it closed. It doesn't have a soaring stage anymore, but we went to Universal, walked in the door, and he said, oh, I want you to meet somebody. And I said, come over here. Chris, this is Hank. Hank, this is Chris. This is Henry Mancini. So the first composer I ever met was Henry Mancini. Not so bad. So then,
what session was it?
It was for Tom and Jerry the movie. But so I met Henry, Hank, and still can't call him that. I still feel ridiculous. But so I met him and really just was blown away and said, you know what, this is really what I want to do much more than be a performer. I'm more of a writer. I like to have things in my head, and I like to establish, or explore lots of different kind of music. So I switched the next day. I actually went and switched my major at USC to composition. And my senior year, when I was really studying composition, we were lucky enough they had a new faculty member who took over as one of the main composition professors, and that was Elmer Bernstein. So so Elmer Bernstein took over, and he was my main teacher as I was going to school there. And I got out of school, and Elmer was nice enough to introduce me to an agency who helped me out a little bit, and I started to get my name around, and then amazingly enough, I had met this woman, Doreen Ringer-Ross, who heads the BMI film music department, and she knew I loved sailing, and she said, you know what, you really have to meet Basil. Basil's a sailor. Aww. And so I met Basil, and we talked, and I offered to help him on his boat for free, and he said, well, why don't you come to the studio and see if you can help me out. They were moving studios at the time, and I just thought I was going to go help him move boxes for a day or two, and 3 years later I was working there all the time, and it was amazing. So that led to Basil, and yeah, and then a year, about a year and a half after I stopped working for Basil, when I was doing a lot of my own independent films, the opportunity came up to go and work for Michael, and I couldn't pass it up because I just was such a big fan of his, and I felt like I could learn so much from him. So I went and worked for him for a while, and meanwhile was still working on my own stuff, and sort of led down that road.
So cool. I actually don't want to ask these questions, but this is some geek stuff for me. What are some of your scores that you grew up with, or some of the classical stuff? I don't know, whatever. Maybe even before it came to film music, what did you listen to?
Well, I mean, before film music, honestly, I probably listened to more film music first.
Really?
But without knowing it, because I grew up, in the late 70s. I grew up with Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Rocky. But I really didn't
Why do I
put it together. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I grew up with that, and Back to the Future. Like I remember having the soundtracks, but I bought the soundtracks because I loved the movies, and but then I really, when I was in my probably 8 to 10 to 12 years old, and I was really starting to get interested in music. I had started playing trumpet, and that's when I really started going to see John Williams at the Pops and getting interested in that. And then I sort of took the sidetrack and started to play guitar and was in rock bands and spent all through high school, learning Led Zeppelin tunes and things like that, which was great too. But then when I got to college is when I sort of veered right back into film music.
Cool. So did you, when you mentioned Elmer Bernstein, I have to first think about, Ten Commandments and all that old stuff, and I don't know, Basil Poliduris, the Free Willy stuff and all that, what he did, and those Starship Troopers and all that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's phenomenal. And then I was lucky enough to work on Free Willy too, which was great, yeah. So, he was a...
So, if you want...
Philip, sit.